Well, why to preserve the Japanese-American story? I think it stems back, as far as my experience goes back in the war years. And I used to be in charge of a construction in Tule Lake. I had approximately 250 men working under me. And as we have a coffee break or stop, and then the East Say folks will always say, I mean, whenever it is, every day they say the same thing over and over and over. This is, in Japanese, is Saki ga wakaranai de tsurai. Our futures are unknown, so it's very trying. Because here they are, they have little kids running around, they have to start from scratch. Actually, no car, no house, no beds, no mattress, no pots and pans, this and that. And today you never know it. But I think that's the reason why the museum, to me, is very important, that this story has to be kept alive. I think the worst part of it is to talk about the hardship. The East States, especially Japanese East States immigrant parents, never talk about the hardship. They never talk how tough it was during Depression years, how they had to scratch and say what they can do to make a living. That's the reason why so many of the youngsters have a hard time understanding the Issei, because they don't talk about because you don't hear the Nisei saying, "Oh, we struggled during the Depression year." I think H.E. got involved with us. I mean, we knew them from before the war, but H.E. coming back from camp, he was one of the first Nisei that got into the community activity as American activity, like the school board. He was first to join the school board, one of the first to join the Santa Clara County Fairground Board, the farmers group, and the history of San Jose. And H.E. had a real strong mind. Like you've probably seen, he was in charge of the farming in Heart Mountain, and he wrote down every item that they raised, how many pounds, and so forth. And he raised things there that he could never raise in any place else. And through discussing with other people that come from the cold country farming, because we're warm country farmers, and how he was able to kickstart the crops. Because I was kind of involved with him, and I was in construction in Heart Mountain, and we discussed how can we grow something. We had no money to bring greenhouses, so we call hotbeds. We had hotbeds here, and H knew what a hotbed was. I said, let's make a hotbed. The ground freezes 6 feet down in Heart Mountain. So the only way we can is to create a heat from the bottom up. Then how do we do that? Well, HE, we all knew we call it humus. So get straw and get cow manure, horse manure, any kind of manure that will create heat, and mix it up. We dig a big trench and be down there about 4 or 5 feet deep, and fill the straw and cow dungs, and then that create the heat. Okay, the museum is, I would say, a forward reflection of the Japanese character, Japanese background. I think how we struggled to fight discrimination. And I think, in today's, like the Muslim, when the Iraq war started, they were treated very harshly because they looked like the enemy. And like us, we looked like the enemy back in 1941. Naturally, we were really crucified before looking. Yet we had nothing to do with the war. Just as much as the Muslim people, they're the second generation. They had nothing to do with the war. They were American citizens here, but yet the American people, because you look like the enemy. I think that's a harsh part of it. And when 9/11 come along there, naturally they were really looked at that they're the killer of the people. 1,000 people was killed, and yet they were really chastised. And I stood up in the first December the 7th. We had a rally in San Francisco, and the younger generation asked me to speak on behalf of the Muslim people. And so I told them, you had to understand them. You had to learn to work with them and learn their culture. That's the main thing. Just like our culture, they have to understand. I think the American people understand our culture, how we live by the American standards. I mean, we live in America, work like an American. I think they do too, same thing, but let's understand them, let's work with them and get educated with them. I think that's very important. I think the most important thing to leave behind the future generation is not so much the struggle, how we cope with the hardship and how the Americans looked at us as non-American, yet we were able to prove that we were Americans. I think that's the whole thing we got to leave behind, the legacy that we were born as an immigrant child, but we were all American, and we lived like the Americans, and we did like the Americans, I think, and we showed the Americans that we were industrious enough and come ahead and provide for the community. Well, let's say leave a legacy behind the Japanese legacy. Aichi was a very, I think, futuristic type of person, looking at the future, because he looked at his dad, how his dad preserved things in the farm. I think he wanted to keep on that legacy of his farm, dad, to keep on the legacy of the Japanese. Besides, Aichi was he didn't know about industrious, innovative. Like, he built a forklift from parts from our Army surplus and made a four-wheel drive forklift. And then he made the pear sorting machine that could be taken out in the field and then be running so they can sort the pears out in the field without doing it by hand. I mean, he was always thinking, what can I do better myself? So I think in the everyday life too, he's trying to better himself. And then for the farmers, he's trying to better for them too, to improve their farming and how to make life easier. I think, before sorting by hand, this way here, machine runs through, just drops in different sizes and get the pears sorted. I think that's very important, that he really was thinking ahead, but gradually, naturally, his pear orchard went down and went to other type of farming. So, but still, he had the idea of improving everything. But so I think if you visit his farm and look at some of the things that he built, it's unbelievable. What the Issei will say, "Saki ga wakaranai," that's right. Our futures are unknown, so it's very, very trying. Which is not the right translation, but then again, give an idea of anybody leaving camp. The majority of them got $25, and that's all they got from the camp, and they went out with $25 in their hand and start their life all over again without knowing nobody. They just, a lot of people that lived in the valley came to San Jose, like Watsonville, Salinas people came to San Jose, not knowing very few people, and lived in barns and lived in tents, and just maybe 3-4 families will pile into one house. Each family will get one bedroom, and they live together like that. And it's not the comfortable thing, but then they have to do it. That's the only way they can survive. He says, as I seen when I was growing up, they were always never say how tough it was or how hard it was. They just went out there and worked and showed us that anything can be conquered. And I think the story of their struggle had to be saved because the fact that I myself, like other older Niseis, I'll be more classified as older Niseis, being 86 today, but remember our Niseis, how we worked through the Depression years. And the discussion comes up, if you went through the Depression, you know how hard it was, and how the Niseis, even though they didn't have very much, but they tried to do what they had and not to complain and just work. They just from sunrise to sunset and some. So, we learned that the not to work hard and not to complain. So even like coming out of camp, they never complained. They just went out there and worked. And I think those kind of stories that we have to keep and preserve and tell our younger generation how our East says. I think, well, the museum would show mostly the good part because that's all they have. The bad part. I could tell a little funny story about the bad part of it. Like our old folks, they love to drink, and naturally, when they drive a car and they get in an accident, this and that, and that first thing the judge sentenced you for 10 days in jail for drunken driving, and here they could go up there and they hire somebody to sit in the jail for them for 10 days. They don't have to sit in jail for 10 days, so it hurt them. So they still keep on drinking and get drunk and, drive and they get caught. But that's kind of a funny story, but they were to help each other out. I mean, the guys get drunk and get in trouble right away. They see they could help them out, get out of jail term and such.